3, 2, 1. What's going on, everybody? It is another episode of Ash on Comics. My name is Ash, and today we got a comic. It is Batman 126, and I did an Ash on Comics video of the last issue, the launch of the Zdarsky run on Batman. Pretty exciting. My dream cast for Batman. Too little too late for me personally. I've kind of tuned out of DC, just in full transparency. Has a lot more to do with the operations of the company than the actual quality of the book. I talked about the last book. It was really solid. Not a complete home run, but still. When the world of mainstream comics, you can't expect absolute greatness every time. Right? Mainstream comics, especially ongoing comics, are a marathon, not a sprint. And in my opinion, quality is measured in longevity and consistency. My favorite all-time comic writer is Frank Miller. Probably the best ongoing comic series of all time, in my opinion, is his Daredevil run. But in the greater scheme of things, even that wasn't that many issues. My favorite all-time comic ever is Batman Year One. That was 4 issues. It's a lot easier to do greatness in a small, enclosed work that you have a lot of time to build to. If you have to meet deadlines month after month after month, that's a bigger chore. Now, when you start a new run, it's a little bit different than 30 issues in. So I kind of expect runs to start off strong. Zdarsky's got all of his big ideas right to get-go. 2 years from now, where the series is at will really be the test, right? Kind of like Daredevil. His Daredevil run, fantastic. But the best stuff was in the beginning, the first half of that run. The second half wasn't bad, but you could clearly tell it wasn't quite as inspired. That's just how things go. So that all being said, at risk of going into the weeds like I normally do, let's get into this book. This is the second issue of his run. I didn't really know what to expect. We left off with somewhat of a cliffhanger, true comic fashion. A trope that I really dig is you kind of tell your little story and then you have like your last page being like, ooh, next issue, this. And that was the fail-safe robot thing or whatever it is. And this issue, let's get it. It starts off. We see some of the Bat family. Interesting little 6-panel grid. We see the backs of what's his name? I forget his dumb name. The Signal. God, this is such a. It's a character that somewhat had potential, but honestly, I think it's something that was thrown at the wall and it didn't stick, and they just need to sort of let this one go. I really don't like the idea of characters being created and they don't really work, and they just like hold on to it and like, no, we're gonna force this one, make it work. That seems to be one of the major differences in the modern era of comics versus like the heyday, which is like the 60s, 70s, 80s, the Stan Lee years. Stan Lee really, he threw tons of stuff at the wall, and lots of stuff didn't stick, and he was just like, nope, gone, scrap it, and really put a magnifying glass on the things that did stick and built on it. And that's how Marvel built their house. DC and modern Marvel too, they're not taking the lesson. They're just like, oh, what? Naomi's just not selling? She's not even in the top 100? Keep making comics. Her series, her TV show got canceled? Sure, just keep pushing it. No one wants these dumb characters. Let them go. Let them go. Focus on the stuff that works. Anyways, so here I am. talking about this new Batman issue, trying to catch myself up. I'm doing multiple things at once in the background, and you can tell because I'm stuttering. So we got the Bat family. We got Babs. We got what's that? One of the Batgirls, Cassandra Cain. We got Nightwing. Looks like the other Batgirl, Stephanie, and then we've got Tim, the gay Robin, who shall ever forever be future known. And the art in this comic is gorgeous. Gorgeous. Jose Jimenez is easily one of my top 3 artists in the business. And I've said this since he started with like the Tynion run on Batman. I don't even think Batman is his best stuff. I don't think he's suited for Batman. In my opinion, he's absolutely fantastic, so whatever he draws is going to look great. But I thought his work on Super Sons is where I came to know who he was. That's my introduction to him. And then later on in Justice League, and maybe I'm just biased because that was my introduction, and so that's how my mentally process his work. That style, he changed his style for Batman, and rightly so. Batman, I believe, works better with a grittier art style to get that dark, shadowy, heavy inks, and that's fine. I appreciate that Jimenez is adopting his style for that. I just don't think for me it's as appealing. I would much rather see him go back to Justice League. However, I'm not going to complain that he's drawing a Chip Zdarsky book either. So, and I just love this. An often underlooked aspect of art, in my opinion, is the artist's ability to choose interesting angles. Your mediocre artists and your poor artists oftentimes will draw very flat, right? If you pay attention, you'll notice that a lot of their shots are just straight eye level, cross, not a lot of interesting angles. And that's often due to the fact that because they're not very strong artists, it's harder to draw things like a human body at an unusual angle. They're not practiced at it, and so they don't. But when you can see an artist basically think like a cinematographer and choose this upshot angle here is just, it's very eye-catching, and it makes things more interesting, especially when you're just having characters sitting around talking. It's very important. We have Batman talking to Robin about things, and it's just some kind of small talk. It's just basically getting the comic going. And we got Bruce. He's got a monologue, and I love when Batman writers write the inner monologue. I know some viewers might correct me on this, and please do. I don't want to get things wrong, and I don't ever pretend to be the foremost expert of comics at all. I do know some things, and I try to share my knowledge and understanding, but there's lots of things I don't know as well. And this is me more sharing myself and my thoughts on comics rather than trying to talk down to people and say, here's what you need to know. Like, it's just fun talking about books. Now, I think Frank Miller popularized the monologue. That was kind of his tropiness of always having the constant be in the character's head. It's possible that was before. Let me know if that's the case, because he came into comics being a fan of people before him. So, anyways, moving on, we see Bruce looking at computers, and then something's behind him. It's fail-safe, and boom, the comic is off to the races. Chip Zdarsky writes a very exciting comic that's almost an entire fight, the whole book. And I gotta tell you, I feel like I've been missing that. This is what like comics in the early 90s used to just be like all the time. And to a fault, right? If you remember the old Image books, when Image first got off the ground with the early 7, that's all they were. Like, it was really bad, right? Not much, but just tons of action shots. Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, those guys, Mark Silvestri. It's just a chance to draw cool-looking characters constantly battling and fighting and stuff. And that's what comics used to be. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, right? Sometimes you do want an intellectual, thought-provoking book, and there's places for that, especially in the indies. But in mainstream comics, this is where it's at. I think it needs to be more like this, and I had forgotten how much I didn't really forget, but it's just I'm so used to it now. A lot of characters standing around. There's times you'll read a Marvel or a DC book and there won't be one single fight in the whole book, and you're like, what's going on? Here, this isn't a fight, and not only is it a fight, but it's one thing I talk about this too quite a bit. When you write a fight is a story in itself. So not only do not a lot of comics these days not have a lot of fighting in them, but when they do have fighting, it's just random. I see so many comics where a fight will just be a big 2-page splash and it's a bunch of characters on the page all just blasting things, and it's just a cool pinup shot, but it doesn't tell a story. It just shows like, hey, look, there's action going on, but it doesn't make sense. Action is a story, and if you study action films, for example, any stunt choreographer will tell you like that's their job, is to create a story within the story to make that fight, because that's really all what stories are anyway, is conflict and resolution. A fight is conflict and resolution. So here there's not a lot of dialogue. We just get to see Batman fighting this failsafe thing, which completely comes across like a Terminator. That's what this is. This is Batman versus Terminator. Obviously, it's not really Terminator, but that's the feel. If you wanted to read a book where Terminator's coming after Batman, and it's just on. This thing is... I love how this failsafe thing is it doesn't mess around. It doesn't do small talk, right? Just like the Terminator. It's here to do its job, and it's ruthlessly efficient. So Batman's, fighting it. He's getting his butt kicked. He has to escape. He uses his car to pull him out of the fight. Really cool stuff here. Swings him out into traffic. This is so cool. Look at this. The car's on, autopilot, but it's, he's like being dragged out through the traffic. This is so dangerous. This would be such a cool stunt scene in a movie. Sometimes these are things you can only do in comics, and that's what makes comics so great, is you don't have to worry about budgets. You don't have to worry about putting your actors in danger or how you're going to have stuntmen pull off the impossible or anything. You can do anything your mind can imagine. And you should utilize that. You should play to your strengths. This book does exactly that. Chip Zdarsky writes a great action sequence. This might be the best action sequence I have ever read from him. Because his Daredevil books had some action, but I don't really think of his Daredevil series as an action series. It was much more of a drama series with some action. But here, Batman is just put to the test. We get a cool shot of Batman throwing Batarangs. I made a comment about this when we talked about, what was it? The Detective Comics. I did a video on Detective Comics, and Sergeant Bass, my friend Sergeant Bass, he's like used to always tell me, "Oh yeah, Batman needs to be throwing Batarangs, or otherwise it's not a good comic." And sure enough, here he's throwing. I don't personally care, but now every time I see that, I think about Bat. So, but it's just great, just over and over. As you can see here, as I'm flipping through the shots, it's just a non-stop fight. And then eventually, the Batgirls show up, which I kind of roll my eyes. Not Chip's fault. He's got to write the continuity. I don't really like the whole Batgirls concept, but it's there. And so he's utilizing it. They come to try to help Batman, but of course, they're not Batman. They are subpar. They're the minor leaguers. And I really respect that Chip doesn't try to shoehorn them and be like, oh, girl power. Look, they can do anything Batman can do. They get their asses handed to them. And that's cool. That heightens the threat. And the whole time, Batman barely, he's just escaping with his life. He's not, this is something you're not really used to. I haven't seen Batman in a position like this very often. Other than when he's outclassed by cosmic villains and things. I'm talking, but his own stuff, like Bane, I don't know. So we see the Signal come in. He gets a kick, and he's just a distraction. And Robin is trying to help him get away, and the failsafe overhears the conversation, and we get a little bit of a Predator vibe. Remember the first Predator movie? The Predator would be like stalking the prey and listening to them talk, and he would be mimicking them, saying the same things that they were. So he's like, oh yeah, here's, Leslie, we're going to meet Leslie. She's down in the cave. And the robot's just like, meet us in the cave. And so it's like stalking him. So he gets away. Again, every panel is just full of action. Then Nightwing shows up, and he's coming straight at the Batmobile. We see Tim's face, like, oh shit, Nightwing, and it's just like, boom, just jumps off the front of the car, launches the motorcycle into failsafe, does a backflip off it. Again, it's just non-stop action scenes. And then we get the cool Nightwing pose where he's just like, hey, Babs, because Babs is Oracle, and he's talking around the radio, and they're trying to coordinate this whole rescue, and they're fighting. Failsafe launches up. They think, oh, he's gone, where did he go? And then boom, he just comes crashing down, and he's just whooping ass on everybody. And I love to see this. It is so great to see your heroes in peril. So many modern comics, it's like the heroes just whoops ass all the time, because so many of these characters they're not even really like the classic characters. A lot of these are like these virtue signal characters that are meant, like these feminist characters like Captain Marvel, or the new Kate Bishop Hawkeye, or Jane Foster Thor, or, any of these like female replacement characters that are put in to be like, look at me, I'm a girl, and I can do everything the men can do and way better. And they never really get put through the ropes. They never really get challenged. They're just there to show off and be like, look how awesome they are. They just feel like self-validation, which is really weird because fictional characters don't need to be validated. So anyways, I think comics like this, and maybe it's because I'm a guy, maybe that's the difference between guys and girls. If you're a girl, you tell me what you think, but I think guys like to see, think about all the great hero-type stories. I'm not even talking about superheroes. Think of stories like Rocky, right? The reason why the Rocky movies work so great is because you got this guy, and he's down, he's on the ropes, and he's fighting through. In the first Rocky movie, he doesn't even win. Spoiler alert. But he just goes the distance. He doesn't give up. This book is very much like that. Can you go the distance? Can you save Batman, right? These guys, they don't stand a chance, but they're buying time, and Failsafe is just basically playing with them. He ends up getting to the Batcave before Batman even does, and Leslie's there, and it's a scary moment because you're like, oh shit, and she's like, who are you? He's like, I'm going to end Batman. And apparently they go to a different Batcave. I'm not really quite sure because Bruce says something about like the old cave, and Bruce keeps mentioning something about like, oh, like it's familiar. Here it is. He's like, failsafe is familiar, but familiar doesn't mean the same thing when you have a mind that remembers everything. It's an aberration, a fault line running clean across my memory. There's a ticking deep in my head like a clock. Tick-tock. I've done this to myself. And then we see like, Oracle, it's Tim. Barbara, come in, Barbara. And then something starts talking. Come in. Only one man could have done this to me. A failsafe for a failsafe. And this is where it got a little confusing to me. And that's not a bad thing. I don't think it's confusing because it was poorly written. I think it's confusing because it's trying to leave some mystery. And we get this. Now, I never read this old series, but this is somewhat familiar to me. And I know Breen probably could tell me for sure. But if you know, this is some sort of, not necessarily an Elseworlds, but kind of an Elseworlds. There was a Batman story where he went to like another world. That's why I think this name Zur-En-Arrh. I can't remember. I think it was a Silver Age story. I just remember this costume. I remember talking about it on one of those many different comic book streams, but I never read this book. And this really kind of threw me for a loop because before this reveal, I was thinking, oh shit. Do you remember like the story? If you're a Batman fan, you know like how Batman he's got a backup plan, like how to take out the Justice League. I think it was Morrison that did it. I don't remember. But that whole thing of like how he could take out any of the Justice League. He had a plan just in case any of them went bad. And then I think it was Snyder that did the whole thing about like, well, what happens if you go bad? I think that was in Metal. I don't remember. If you remember that, you can put that in the comments too. But I'm pretty sure it was Scott Snyder that did the whole thing. Well, what happens if you go bad? And Batman says to them, well, that's what the Justice League is for. Which I thought was a pretty cool response to all that. But then when I was reading this book, I was like, oh shit, what if failsafe is Batman's plan for himself? In case he went bad, he creates the failsafe. And I was like, that's really freaking cool. Like, but then we get this. So I don't know if I'm onto something or this is something completely different. But that's the end of the book. Now, unfortunately, this is one of those damn two-parter books, and the next story is a Catwoman story, and it's also written by Chip Zdarsky. I talked about this in the last one. I'm not going to really talk about this one again. It's the same thing. It's whatever. I could really leave this. I read it, and I was like, I don't care. We already have a Catwoman book. Either put Zdarsky on the Catwoman book, or if it's not as good as the Catwoman book, leave the person on the Catwoman book doing Catwoman and just have the one. This story just feels unnecessary. I would rather pay $3.99 for the book and not have this. So it's there. So I guess if you already have it, but you're gonna pay $5.99 or $4.99 for this book. I think it was $5.99. Yeah, I just don't like these double stories. I'm going to keep ragging on them. Some people are going to be like, no, I love it. It's great. Whatever. The problem is if you do love it, that's cool, but people don't have a choice. I would rather have a choice. If these were two separate comics, you could just buy both comics versus having to force everyone to get them. We get the tribute to Neil Adams. Rest in peace. Bravo to you, DC, for doing a 3-page thing on this. The bad news is, are you going to do that for every artist? We've lost a lot of people this year. I don't think George Perez got a 3-page. And so that's kind of a thing, too. It's like, whoa, you know. But anyways, let me get this ad. Batman One Bad Day. When you look at these creative teams, it's 8 one-shot books, 8 number 1 issues for DC to exploit you as a fan. You get 8 number 1s, 1 bad day. Is it really 1 bad day? Seems like 8 bad days. And from my perspective, the bad day is going to be the person that pays for these books and reads it and goes, this is crap. Because out of all this, Josh Williamson is the only one halfway interesting to me. Tom King destroyed Batman. Terrible. Mariko Tamaki, I don't even need to say. John Ridley, Gary Duggan on a Batman book? Are you effing kidding? G. Willow Wilson, Colin Kelly, Tom Taylor. This is Batman 7 bad days and 1 day of reprieve. Josh Williamson. Anyways, if you're going to get those, let me know. Let me know if you're excited for those. Maybe I'm just full of it. I'm not really full of it. They're not my taste. I'm not going to pay that money for that. Then we got Deceased. People are really liking the Deceased. I'm starting to wonder if it's wearing out its welcome, how far they're going to milk this. The answer, they're going to milk it for as long as you'll continue to buy it. So that's it. That's the book. Tell me how I did. Did you get this book? What did you think about it? I think this is aces. Good writing, great art. This is everything you want in a book. This is what it used to be like in the late 80s and early 90s at Marvel when books were just banging it out. Eric Breen tells me DC was doing pretty good too, but I wasn't reading those books back then. it's not going to be the deepest story, but this was fun. It was exciting, and you're going to enjoy going back and peeling through the pages and just looking at the art and study the sequences and the action and just look at all the details. If you're a Batman fan, this book is a treat for you. You're going to get just all sorts of fun. You can't really ask for more. I don't see how you do it. I have to give this book 5 stars. I haven't done that in a long time. This is a near perfect Batman book. And like I said, not because it's super deep. I think the Detective Comics is ultimately probably going to be better than Chip Zdarsky's. But Chip Zdarsky has the benefit of having an ace top artist, whereas Ram V doesn't. But, everything's subjective. You may appreciate the Ram V writing better and want that heavier drama, more artistic, literary style than the straightforward Michael Bay action. But both of them have merit. And what's great about this, if you're a Batman fan, is you get both. You get your action and you get your heavy drama. Great. This is a win. Super win. I'm super excited for this book. If you're a Batman fan, let me know. Let me know if you're disappointed. Let me know if you somehow want more than you're getting. Because I want to know. I'll see you next time.